Welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast, in association with Simcoe Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett. Now, some of you probably already know me as Skippy. I would start by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Today we're with Chris Wiseman. Chris is the Managing Director of Wessex Garages, the subsidiary of VT Holdings. So in the first 90 days, we often say that people learn the skills that last with them for the rest of their life, of good and bad. If I can take you back to that first 3 months when you were maybe that trainee salesperson, is there any tips or ideas that you used back there that is still relevant today? And anything you'd like to pass on that could really help that salesperson that's listening to this podcast who's just starting on their journey?
Avoid shortcuts. Don't make the mistake of listening to everybody else's view of what you should be doing because they've been doing it for a long time. The old soldiers in the business that we all know that know all the little shortcuts and the tricks. Learn the business from the basics up and keep, whatever you do, keep consistency in what you do. So that is whether it's a sales process, the way you're talking to customers, the way you're talking to your colleagues, and subsequently management styles is be consistent. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the best high-flying salesperson in the dealership, because they don't always make the best managers. They're not always the ones that last the course. But from a management point of view, looking back, and what I look for now is total consistency, honest people that work for you, never lie to a customer. Simple as that.
Today, I'm really excited to introduce David Peel. Now, David, this is Selling in the Motor Trade, is a podcast all about sharing tips and best practice and ideas on how to sell more cars, retain more profit, sell more service. Lots of people listening to this might be brand new to the industry, managers wanting to move on. So drawing on your experience, if we had to go back to a young David Peel when you started in the motor trade all those years ago, what advice would you give to David Peel back then, or the person listening to this today? Is there any nuggets of advice you'd like to leave the listeners with?
It's a bit difficult when you've got to give yourself some advice. But I guess, what have I learned? What would I say if it was to my son or daughter today? I truly believe that you can achieve whatever you want to in life. I think you completely believing in yourself. I think a strength, it can be a weakness, but it's to never be satisfied. Always strive for better, and it's, again, you've heard it 2 or 3 times. If you put 110% effort in every day, I think tomorrow will always offer better opportunities. And if I had £1 for every time somebody in my career that was working for me said, give me an opportunity to do that better job, if I gave £1 away or had £1, I'd be a rich man, because I've always been consistent in my response to that question right from the early days. And that is, you have the opportunity to get that next job every day of the week. Every day of the week, I'm watching. And if you're overachieving, if you're putting in more effort, if you're giving that little bit more, by the time that next job comes, I'm going to be coming to you, tapping you on the shoulder and offering you that job. So your opportunity to prove to me that you want the bigger job is every day in advance, not when the job arrives. And I think that's the sort of ethos I've always worked towards, is that, if you work hard enough, the next job will automatically come. Yeah. So I think that would be my advice, is believe in yourself and, have confidence that, you can set your own objectives. And if you work hard enough and you're determined enough, those will open up doors and opportunities for you for the future.
David, that is Just great advice. Absolutely great advice to anyone listening to this. I'm super excited today because we're going all the way across the pond, all the way to Canada. And today I'm joined with Jason. And Jason is Strategy with Jason. It's got a great podcast. So I just want to say welcome to Jason Harris. And thank you very much for taking the time. Yeah, so we get on to your, if it was mastermind, this would be your subject matter. You'd talk about marketing. So if you're speaking to a general manager at the moment, dealer principal, an owner, or maybe even the sales manager who wants to start getting into marketing, right now, 2020, what we've been through, what should they be going and looking at with marketing? What are the trends they really should be doing? Because the reason why I say that is email comes through all the time. Is email where it's at? We've been doing that for a while now. What do we need to be looking at, Jason?
Well, literally every single channel you have to be looking at. There is no, look, everyone loves to create these attribution models. And they're like, what attributed to the sell? What attributed to the lead? And a lot of these attribution models are built on what we call last click attribution. So it's the last thing they clicked on that generated the phone call or the internet lead or so on and so forth. You understand, the consumer is consuming so much information more now than even ever. All right. It's really a monster multi-channel approach. Like, you have to be willing to communicate to a customer on Facebook Messenger. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to communicate them on text message. You have to be willing to communicate with them through video chat. You have to be willing to communicate with them in whatever medium they choose to. Like, everybody knows that if you want to get a hold of me, you don't call me and you don't text message me. If you want to get a hold of me quickly, you LinkedIn message me, because everybody knows that's where I spend majority of my time, right? I mean, even yourself, you were reaching out to me, you're like, oh, my LinkedIn message. Okay. So that's, I think, the biggest thing we have to understand is that, we can't define anymore how customers can engage with us. We have to engage with the customer the way they want us to. That's one. The second thing is, it's not necessarily price that the customer gives a crap about right now. They want to know what your brand is about, before they're coming out, and they're looking forward to coming to your dealership, especially right now, because they haven't been able to leave the house for a long time. So they're excited about coming, but they got to know what they're coming to. And it's more now, I would say, of a messaging perspective, it's more of, what does that experience look like? But when I come into the dealership, that's the message that consumers want to know, so they feel confident in choosing your location versus others. So I would spend less time in marketing payment. And I spend more time really developing out what that brand is, because brand is something that just lasts forever. It doesn't go away when that monthly promotion is done.
Yeah. It's my great privilege today to introduce Dave Anderson. I'm thinking about that brand new sales manager here. What advice do you have for them? How do they develop that internally motivated people? Avoid the 5-car Fred culture creeping into the business. So yes, we've got to hold people accountable, but what specifically would you do to encourage that internal motivation? How do they find out what really internally motivates a particular person?
A couple of thoughts. First of all, it all starts with a hiring process. It is like whipping a dead horse to hire an unmotivated person and then try to motivate them from the outside in. It is a low return proposition, trying to hire the right people. And we could talk a lot about hiring, but it's looking for people. I try to find out what somebody's why is during the interview. I want to know, do they have something worth fighting for? Are they clear as to the type of person they're trying to become? Who's counting on them to come through? What goals do they have? They need to bring me something to work with, Simon. I can't put in what was left out. I can draw out what they have within. And so they have to do their part and bring that motivation and drive. If I'm hiring the right people, then there's a couple of key things. We don't motivate them all the same way. You have to know the person. You've got to know them to move them. You've got to know them to move them. Well, most of us don't spend enough time, because we're so busy in the motor trade, with our people to really figure out what makes each one tick. And so we do this assembly line management style.
Yes.
Where we use the same approach and give the same pep talks and just hope some of it sticks. But different people are moved by different ways. One of America's most famous football coaches, Vince Lombardi, said, my job is to learn 40 different ways to move 40 different men. Well, you don't figure that out by memo or by email Our boy voicemail. You have to have conversations with people and realize their motivations change over time. So what motivates him today, which may be more money because he's trying to not have his house foreclosed on, or he's trying to send his kids to a school. Once they start making more money, it may be more recognition. It may be more empowerment to where they don't have to check with you on everything. And then the primary thing, and a lot of managers overlook this, if you're hiring the right people, and you're figuring out what really makes them tick, then get out of their way. Don't do something stupid that demotivates them. The number one motivational strategy is not demotivating people. By micromanaging them, by never giving them positive reinforcement, by blaming them when it's not their fault, by nothing ever being good enough, by only pointing out what they do wrong, by never letting them contribute to an idea. The number one motivational strategy is stop doing foolish things that demotivate your people. And that also means if you're not holding someone accountable, that demotivates the rest of your people. Because now they're having to work around that distraction. They're probably having to do part of that dead weight's work and clean up their messes. And one of the most demotivating things a manager can do is allow non-performance to go unchecked within the culture and not hold that person accountable. It is like a misery on the installment plan for the rest of the team.
It's my great pleasure today to introduce a very, very good friend of mine, Frank Genobile. Listen, this podcast is all about sharing best practice and tips and ideas in the motor trade. Is there any one tip that you think, hold on, that's absolutely brilliant, I like the idea of that one, and you'd like to share it with people listening to this?
In terms of success in the motor game?
Yeah.
I mean, one tip. The owner, the DP has to be invested, has to be fully invested. The things I see, the dealers that are successful, those ones who watch their dealerships wake up in the morning. They're not every morning, but they'll come in and they'll just watch what happens, how the business opens up. So they're invested, they're seen to be invested, they're visible, they drive accountability. What I said before, the crops always grow better with the sound of the farmer's footsteps nearby. It's hard to escape that sort of, if you like, leadership and governance.
That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn.